You and your party are walking through the enchanted woods. It is filled with the day's dew. There are birds chirping. You've walked for now about a half a mile into the woods. All the noise seems to stop. You start to enter a clearing and you see a cabin. At first, you think, maybe this is just a hunting cabin of one of the local villages. But it looks left, forgotten, besides the smoke that rises out of its chimney. What are you and the party doing?
I'm not going in there.
Yeah, me neither.
Don't worry about it, guys. I'm going to send Jeffrey in.
Yeah, that's
Jeffrey?
probably- yeah.
Jeffrey!
Oi, what was it, sir?
Jeffrey, I'm going to need you to go over to that cabin, rasp upon the door, and enter. Do it for me,
Alright.
good man, and there's a gold coin in it for you.
Alright, I could do that for you. And
Chop, then.
Jeffrey proceeds to now walk forward to the door. With 3 raps upon the door. A couple seconds pass, the door swings open. And a lightning bolt flies out, launching Jeffrey back at your feet, fried and crisped like a fresh potato chip.
I think that was the right choice for us to make.
Yes. We still have, well, we do have several ponies, so we could either send the ponies in, or we can trade them for another Jeffrey in the nearest town.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can ride the ponies.
That is true.
That one looks a little bony, though.
I mean, that was Jeffrey's, so we don't really.
Take care of it much. Yeah, you
You
guys
gotta
don't.
keep those bone ponies.
So you proceed to travel to the next town, and welcome to Tabletop Totality. You are, of course, here with Neil. In this episode, we are talking about pretty much the managing of your NPCs. Let it be your bone ponies, your Jeffreys, or perhaps that baby owl bear you stole and are trying to raise as your own. It's kind of one of those things that gets forgotten upon as you were only worried about your character, as is kind of natural. So where do we want to start off with this one, boys? As a DM, sometimes it can be harsh on you to add an NPC into the game as you're trying to run the story, but you may feel like your party needs the extra hand or they want to hire on somebody. And I feel like one of the best tips for that is whoever wants to hire that person on, you let that player control them. Maybe you do as the DM the more RPing for that NPC, right? But when it comes to combat, you let your players handle those NPCs. Let it be their pony, their animal companion, or if it's a hireling named Jeffrey.
Or hireling named anything else, really. I mean, you can call your hirelings whatever you want.
Nah, from here on out, all hirelings are called Jeffrey.
Oh no, don't do that. So let's find a good place to start. When you have hirelings, are we also going to include animal companions into this conversation?
I would say so. That's one of those things where maybe a class based animal companion is different than a purchased animal companion.
Right on.
So like a class based animal companion, they come with their own set of rules, dictations from the class. There's usually a lot of tie-ins with the class, special connections, what have you, like a wizard and their familiar is is going to be very drastically different than a fighter who bought a attack badger. The attack badger is maybe going to be trained in a couple of things where the wizard's familiar can actually shift through demiplanes.
First of all, a badger requires no combat training. It's innate.
Well, it's more the training to be in full plate armor.
No,
And
it's got that too. It's
oh,
forged
okay.
its own plate mail.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is this a honey badger?
Of course.
Okay.
Are there any other kind?
I mean, yes,
What's happening?
but yeah, honey badgers, you don't mess with them.
They
Yeah,
are
I mean-
imposters to the honey badger throne. So,
Yeah, have you ever seen a honey badger den? It's just corpses and plate armor everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
So they have a natural bonus to creating armor. Is what
they
They're-
get,
they're
they get a
also-
+5 to fuck you up.
They ride regular. The honey badgers ride the regular badger.
Yeah. So
they're
like,
little hedgehogs that ride the honey badgers
Okay. All right.
with mice archers.
okay.
This is
Welcome
we're just
to
we're-
welcome to Redwall. With
yeah. I was
Johnny
gonna say.
Ross.
Well, yeah. I was gonna say we're just making Redwall at this point. Like, what, what are we doing?
So back to
Clearly.
the topic for today. NPCs. So
So let's I guess we'll start with the first one, animal companions of, not class related. How do you go about that? Do you take time as the DM? Do you have it take a certain amount of time of the character getting acquainted to that animal? Does the animal need to imprint upon the person? Yeah, you might be able to buy it, but does it maybe not listen to you as much in the beginning? But the longer you have it and the longer you use said creature, it becomes more imprinted upon you. The regular state of this animal, this warhorse, is trained to have a rider on it. They're trained to be in combat, right? But maybe they're not so much trained to do where if I whistle, this thing will know to ride past me and I'll jump onto it. Like if I whistle twice, you know what I mean? So there's always little nuances that it's not going to know. It's not going to know those things. So I would say, yeah, there's a base level of training for a lot of creatures that you can buy. Oh, it's okay with a person riding it. It's okay with easy attack commands, maybe, and then there's the whole idea, where did you purchase it? What language does it speak? Did it get trained in Elvish and it can only listen to Elvish speak? These are all cool things to have in there. Yeah, and
even a
then
Pegasize.
yep, you can have that too. And those will be your more exotic ones. Like if there's a trader for that, and in Dungeons and Dragons they do a pretty good depiction. If you even go to a lot of these creatures, it describes how it would go about training some of them if they're unique mounts. So like a hippogriff, it goes in and talks about, one of the biggest things if you have a hippogriff that you have to make sure is it's always fed, because they are horse eaters. So they hunt horses, and if it's hungry, it'll just kill a horse, and that could get you into a lot of issues because now you maybe have to pay repercussions for a dead horse and possibly somebody trying to kill your hippogriff.
That's interesting. Like the same would be with like a smaller dragon.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Well,
like-
I mean, for those who are Game of Thrones fans, they kind of do depict that in the I forget what season it is, but when the dragons start getting older and flying away, they just start killing anything and eating it. How well trained is trained for a very exotic creature. That's one of the
Well,
big things.
one of the things that I could throw into this is that, part of the research I've done for like creating storylines and stuff like that is I had a short story in mind that involved a knight, and I wanted to know more about like knight culture and what they really kind of, like really kind of like what they ate and drank and that sort of thing. And I ended up watching several programs where there's this guy who shows you about, how they dressed and what kind of beer they drank and things like that. Well, he's got one episode where he has a horse, and he loves this horse. He works it very well, and he's very comfortable riding it in a lot of situations. But it is not a war horse, and so he was trying to run his horse through those training to make it better capable, like to do that. So like one of the things is that like a horse will try to avoid things that are on the ground. It'll try to avoid like stepping on things that are on the ground. Like it's just naturally will try to do that. Because you got to think, imagine like it doesn't want to step on a snake or something. So
Mhm.
it tries to avoid that. So part of becoming a war horse is actually training your horse to purposely step on bodies, to step on cadavers.
Yep.
I've just run this guy down with my spear, and now I want my horse to step on him when I turn around. You
Yeah.
know, training the horse to kick, to bite, training the horse to not run away from the scent of blood, from the
Mhm.
sound of battle.
Yeah.
So when you're getting into a more like a fantasy, like a fantastical creature, like a hippogriff or a dragon or something like that, like yeah, I would imagine you'd have to keep those things very well fed all the time, or they're just going to start messing things up to get what they want because they're predators.
Yeah,
Like
it's
a
the
horse is
whole
a prey animal,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
it's the whole impact of even like looking at in our society in the real world, you look at wolves, like yeah, you can domesticate a wolf, but it's still so far out of the domesticated animal. It's still wild. It may listen to you, it may do these things, but it has more of a hunter spirit, if you
Yeah,
will, where it's gonna that's what it's gonna do. This is what
yeah.
it's designed
There,
for.
there were a lot of stories that have come out the last like 10 or 15 years about people that are like, oh, I've domesticated this bobcat or whatever, like some kind of hunter animal, and it's like, oh, it lives in our house. It's part of our family. We've had this tiger for 10 years. It's our best friend. Oh my god! And then one day, it's like there's this story of tiger mauls entire family, and it's like, yeah, because its instinct is to hunt and kill things. That's
Mhm.
just what it does, and you can never really take that out of an animal like that.
Yeah, so
So
it's
I had a sorry, Neil. I
you're
had a
good.
dog. I had a yellow lab, and that dog, her hunting instinct was so like overactive. Like she just constantly wanted to chase down something. And I mean, I had that dog when I was a little kid, and I remember there was a time where I was quite afraid of that dog because she would just jump out of the back of a pickup truck and like go chase down a rabbit and kill it. And it wasn't just for fun, like, she would eat the creature. And, like, it was just so I don't know if she was a pure lab or what, we got it from the shelter, but she was just, like, so into that wild state that going out and hunting I mean, she would disappear for days on end, and she'd be perfectly fine. Like,
Yeah.
we never worried about like, she would come back, you know? So, it's just kind of like it's crazy. Like I know what you're saying, like with the wolf, like you can't just take that out. And I had a family member who's passed on, but he worked for a facility where there was animals that were raised, and it was for a college. And he ended up getting two German Shepherd Timber Wolf like mixes,
Oh man, I would
and
love that.
yeah, he had them both at his house. And I remember we'd go and visit, and those yeah, sure, they looked like dogs, they looked like big dogs, but they do not act like dogs. They don't act like house dogs. They act like wolves, and wolves do not like men. They don't like humans. They don't like man,
No.
you
No,
know?
it's that whole aspect, like, they're gonna it's any animal that encounters anything in the wild. But anyway, to bring it back into D&D, think about these things as the DM. All right, is this player or even as the player, all right, I have this hippogriff, cool, sweet. The DM told me that these are possibilities that can come out if I don't keep my hippogriff trained or fed properly. That it's just going to go out and do these things. So,
Well, even just like you were talking about before, like you had mentioned Game of Thrones and Daenerys Stormborn where they're dragons. Well, she's not the only person that has like a magical companion or mount because the Starks all get their wolves, and
Yep.
in the novels, much more so than the show, the wolves are very prominent, and there's some sort of magical connection between the Starks and the wolves, just like there's a connection between Daenerys and her dragons,
Yeah.
and it kind of they transcend that like normalcy, like those are not a pet or a creature that you could just go to a town and get even in a fantasy setting, like
Mhm.
they are almost like a birthright to these characters, you
Mhm.
know. So you could have something like that, like I mean if you had like a ranger, like a beastmaster, yeah, you could have all sorts of cool origin stories for these like crazy exotic creatures that he has or she has or whatever. But your regular, like what you're gonna find in a town, like it might be exotic, but I don't think you're gonna find like a full size, like dangerous creature. You might find like small babies of those creatures.
Well, I mean, you still can have it's the aspect of allowing maybe to get like maybe there's an exotic you're in a big city, it's big with maybe animal trade and they're high in exotic animals. They go out, capture these things, maybe don't get to train them in a normal sense, and they're like, "Hey, you want to buy this thing? Buy it." And the player's like, "Oh, that's so cool! I could have this as a pet." But it's different than their companion Beastmaster, who has a special connection through his ritual, blood right, whatever it may be, whatever his backstory is to why he can have this giant 60-foot snow wolf.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that I think that's what we're trying to really get at as we're saying that you as the person who's running the game, just because it's a possibility in your world or whatever that your player could get one of these creatures or could befriend one of these creatures, like you have to figure out how that works,
Yeah.
you know and so don't be afraid to put limitations on it, like to begin with. Like don't be afraid to say, like, listen, if you don't take care of this thing, like it's gonna start eating people.
Yeah.
Like flat
Maybe it
out.
thinks children are it's like it goes after smaller infants. Well, you're walking through a city and
I
you
mean,
didn't feed it, and now it's massacred an orphanage.
we're children of the 80s and the 90s, right?
Yeah.
We all have seen Gremlins. We all
Oh,
know
yeah.
about the Magua. You're not supposed to get them wet. You're not supposed to feed them after midnight.
Yep.
Nope.
You had to follow those instructions or something bad was going to happen. And I feel like that's
Sure, yeah.
I feel like if you are bad to the people that work for you, then you're not going to have a lot of people working for you,
Oh, yeah.
unless you're like one of those people that like rules through fear, like clean the floor, Jeffrey, or I will
Yeah.
behead you.
Or unless you treat them like we treated Jeffrey in our intro, where they just die from mistreatment, and then no one really knows, the
Right.
story of how you treat your hirelings because they all die before they can
Well,
spread the news.
That's it. They'll know that, "Man, didn't they come in with another guy and now
Nope.
they're
Yeah.
looking for
Nope.
another guy?" Like,
No, that guy just
Yeah.
that guy just followed us into town. We don't know who that guy was.
Yeah, be like,
Yeah.
oh, Jeffrey left with them like 2 summers ago.
But then that's another really cool point moving into because I think we did a good job on the animal companions. You gotta keep track if they're just base, "Hey, you can buy a horse practically in any town, and it's gonna have basic training." You can get all that stuff.
Actually, one thing before we run off into the next section here, I
Yeah.
think a big thing a lot of players forget and DMs forget because so much stuff is happening and moving is the fact that there's been a lot of times where the animal companion or the hireling, like, nobody knows where it is. They just don't say where it is, and
That's
Yeah.
very
I'm
important.
glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
I've seen far too
many times where it was like, so the player goes into, let's say, a shop or something like that, or even into a small animal market, and they have, let's say, either like a panther or a tiger or even a dragon or hippogriff with them. like there should be a little issue going on because they have this giant beast with them, or they have
Yeah.
a predator with them in this area. So typically, like, I know when I come into a town and I have animal companions, I'm usually going to the stable first, trying to figure out boarding for everybody. No reason in my mind that guards in a city are going to let your tiger run around following you.
Oh, yeah.
That makes
there
sense.
might be a thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to let the guards know this is what I'm going to do, and they tell everybody, and it takes about a day for the word to get around that your tiger is going with you to a specific building or to do something or do a demonstration.
Or
Yes,
hey,
something.
you guys can come into the city and shop, but you can't stay here. You can't leave this animal here.
Yeah.
Like the tiger does not come into the city; it has to stay outside.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, like the druid or the ranger or whatever, like that's something too that you can use as a dungeon master or a overlord or supreme chancellor, whatever you want to call it, to kind of like make a situation out of your party where it's like, hey, listen, like these people can all come in, but this person cannot
Yeah.
because of their animals or because of something they have, you
Yeah,
know.
Maybe.
the hireling could be, known for crimes.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
no. He's
Right.
with you, I get it, but he stays outside. He doesn't get to come
Right.
in.
Yeah, so I think that's always a good idea because like I this in one of the characters I have, he has a pet hippogriff, and like anytime we're going into a city, I'm like, hey, I like tell my hippogriff it's got to fly above the city, like just keep an eye out up there, and I kind of use it almost like like as a raven, or if you like had a hawk or an eagle
Like
as
a
your
look at.
companion. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they can be up there chilling, but also I know by the end of the day I have to figure something out. I have to either tell it to stay somewhere or be somewhere
Well,
with it.
and I think that's part of the reason why we, I loved, I loved in 3.5 the paladin I had, the Viking paladin there, Biogir. He had a celestial mount because that was a thing for paladins in older editions, and he had this celestial mount that he could summon at will, and it would just apparate in front of him. And it was an eight-legged horse. It was based off Norse mythology with Schleipnir, and I would use that horse all the time. Like it had like a saddlebag and everything, and I would put things on the saddlebag and then dismiss the horse,
Yeah.
and it would go away into like a pocket dimension,
Mhm.
And that was great because it was not everybody could have that. It was something because of my class, because of my divine ability that I was able to do that. Kind of similar in the way that like Runrik has the hippogriff,
Yeah,
but also now you have the dragon that's kind
yeah,
of, and those came from, we're gonna give a little plug here, but Matt Colville and those guys at MCDM, the Strongholds and Followers book
yeah,
is fantastic, and we picked it up and we immediately threw that into our campaign. Because our characters were at the point where, or my players were at the point where they were going to build a keep or base of operations, and so I picked up that book and shared it with my guys, and everybody loved it. And you get to roll for different things, and so Neil kind of lucked out. His character, his paladin, got a hippogriff and a younger dragon
ally. The
ally.
dragon's an ally. It's technically not a. So they do. He does a good job with that too. They do a good job with. All right, here's something that maybe you couldn't have as a companion, but we'll do it more like a hireling sense. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah, and it was cool for me because like the dragons they used are their original dragons. They came up with them. They're not of the chromatic, the traditional D&D dragons. So they have their different, just like how all dragons have like their shtick, like what they do. So they have their own desires, and it was kind of cool that he rolled this random thing, and then it was cool for me as the dungeon master to have to be like, oh well, now I have to write this into my story somehow. I have to write this creature
Yeah.
in, and so I think I was pretty accepting of that. You might find I know for a fact I have been this guy. I've been this dungeon master where I get fed up with players not keeping track of their NPCs or their creatures, and I'm just like, hey, that's not my fault, you know.
Well, you'll have people who, because I mean, I used to play a couple druids and rangers back in the day, and I'd be like, yeah, my companion's always with me. It's always next to me because it's my companion. It's awesome. And then something happens. Yeah, you hit a trap.
Area of effect cells.
You hit a trap. You're in a place you're not supposed to be. You targeted a high level creature that you're fighting, and it hits you with that AoE. And now your most trusted companion, that probably should have never been in that area, is dead. um, that's where it also comes in as a player to be very, very on top of. All right, I am gonna go do this, but my companion is gonna stay back because I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
That's funny that you. Oh, sorry, Steve. You go.
Oh, I was gonna say, and on that note, should we talk about maybe the difference between a functional animal companion and more of an accessory animal companion, like a pet, versus like what we've been talking about so far, like animal companions that actually do stuff for you in terms of like they can fight, they can provide some sort of mechanical advantage for you, versus like I want to buy a pet mouse to just carry around in my pocket because I want to have like a little pet to have.
Let that
should-
happen. Let that happen as a DM, and if it dies, it dies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the leave your pets at your keep, man.
Yep.
Hey, that's just how that works, man. That's just really how it has to be.
Like
Yeah.
if you have a player that's like, no, you can't kill my mouse, Frederick.
Yeah.
He's awesome, and they use it in a lot
Fred
of
is
roleplay.
dead.
Yeah, Fred's dead. You got hit with a fireball. It also hit Fred, who's in your pocket. It's now a fried mouse. You could eat it. I'll count it as a ration for the day.
There you go. I mean, I've brought it up before, but like one of the few times that I wanted to DM, I had a player that wanted to play a druid, and they wanted their animal companion to be like a small dog, and I was like, "You sure you don't want like a wolf or like something more meaty?" And they were like, "No, I want a small dog," and I was like, "Okay, that it doesn't have." It's like as soon as you go into any sort of combat situation, it's going to get targeted and it's going to die. Like if you go into a fight with a bunch of goblins, they're going to see this small animal and they're going to be like, "That thing's weak. We're going to take that out and we're going to take it. We're going to eat it or whatever. That thing's not living." And I was like, "So you better be prepared for that thing to die." And the player was like, "No, I don't want it to die." I'm like, "Then why do you want it in the game?" Like if you're going to do something like that, you had better be willing to accept the risk of losing that creature forever. And yeah, if that's going to be your companion for your class, I would say no, you can't do that, because if that thing dies, there goes like half of your functionality probably in terms of like being able to use.
Yeah, and I think that kind of falls in line with the whole like we've said this before in some of our earlier episodes. If everything is hunky dory at home, like why are you going to go be an adventurer? Like adventuring is dangerous, and you should understand that. So if you're going to bring a pony or something with you, like you need to know, like, hey, it's going to suck trying to go through dwarven mines with this horse.
That's why the Fellowship let Build a Pony go
That's
before
right.
they went down into the freaking mines.
Right. So like, there's just gonna be situations like that. Like you're trying to sneak down a a flight of stairs. Like you can't be like, "Come on, Bill the pony, clip clop, clip clop, clip clop."
Well, that's going downstairs anyway as a horse is just dangerous.
One thing I would say, that's a real thing. Like,
well, yeah, just like you're saying, like with a smart enemy, an intelligent enemy. If you have like an evil wizard or something, and I see somebody and they have a raven or whatever on them, as a wizard, I'm like, that's their familiar.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can take it out, I've just removed one of their options.
Yep.
Like I've just stopped them from doing something because, like in fifth edition, your familiar can cast spells for you.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'd be like, no, I'd immediately take that thing out.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You
No,
know,
and
or
that's
just even where it comes to like to warfare as well. Like you show up at some camp or whatever, and there's a war going on, and you have a bird that's just flying around. They're gonna shoot it down because they're gonna be like, that could be a message. Somebody's sending a message right now.
yeah.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's definitely with you're playing this tabletop RPG, depending on how gritty it is, you really want to make sure, I think in general, an animal companion or any companion for that matter, you have to weigh the option, all right, if I'm going to travel the world and I'm trying to defeat evil boss number A who's trying to cause world domination, maybe I shouldn't take you know, a mouse with me that has no real uh utility for it to be there. I would even say on the aspect of hirelings, the way that it kind of goes besides mistreatment is what type of hireling did you hire? Did you hire a peasant who maybe was impacted by this evil guy who is like, I'm gonna help you guys fight, even if it's just carrying your stuff? You know, is it after a certain amount of time of maybe getting knocked unconscious or being constantly attacked? Does he decide to leave because nobody's training him in any way? And then on the other coin, maybe, you hire a straight up merc, you hire just a mercenary in an inn, and they get stolen by the evil dude because they pay more money. And now he's betrayed you because you didn't treat him well or really form any connection to him. So he has no reason to stay with you besides whoever's paying the most money.
Yep. And the evil guy, 15 enemies instead of the one. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's always a really cool way as the DM to keep accountability for companions, hirelings. There used to be, I know when I was always playing 3.5, even like you'd have the leadership feat and you'd be able to recruit these people and start pretty much like a small, if you will, militia, getting to the point of maybe having an army, was always like the dream of it, right? But if you weren't treating them well, like, why would they be there? Why would they be following you? If you're not paying them, you're not splitting the goods. Like, even you look at any group like that in history. So you have the Vikings, they split everything. And if people felt like they weren't getting split, well, that leader's going to be killed by the top guy in the army, and he's our new leader now.
Well, yeah, and that that factors into like Tolkien uses the rings as a very big device,
Yep.
but that's because of that Viking, Norse, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon tradition from mythology, where a powerful leader, a wealthy chieftain, was expected to honor their warriors and their raiders by giving them cuts of the silver or the treasure, giving them rings. There was a title. There was a powerful title was Ring Gibor, which is the ring giver.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. And I think that Frank, personally, for me, probably did one of the best managements of of a character's like posse, you know, because I had this bard character who came from a different country, and every time I started making money, I started sending money back home and telling more of my friends from back home to like come to this new land,
Mhm.
to like come and settle this new land. Basically, like the Vikings in England
Yeah.
being like, "Oh my God, there's this good farmland. Like, leave Norway. Come on, let's go."
Yeah.
And so that's what I was doing. And so I had like a crew, and I would like keep bringing in like all of these like Viking like settlers and just like start like building out the city. And before long, like Frank had basically made it so like my character was almost like the de facto mayor of the city because I
Mhm.
was like more of like a celebrity. But I had kind of done like a Tammany Hall thing where I'd like I knew I was gonna win because I had all the votes,
Mhm.
because I was in everybody's pockets, like.
Yeah, yeah.
But he was good about it because like he made it like some of them I had like a real connection with. Like there was one guy's name was Bulvi, and he died in like trying to help me like save the world, and that was like a big to do. Like it was like a big event because I gave a shit about the NPC.
Mhm.
And he also had another one. Oh god, I think his name was like Etgow or
Yes,
whatever.
it was that gal.
Yeah, and Etgow he respected me, but he wanted to challenge me.
Yeah, you
And so like
constantly wanted the throne, you know?
anytime I came back from like adventuring or whatever, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm back with all this money and treasure," and he'd be like, where you been, dude?" Bullseye had a cough last week. Where were you?
Mhm.
Like,
Well,
yeah,
his
Johan got a splinter cutting logs for you. Where were you? And he would like really like make me feel bad.
Yeah.
And then I would have to do like I'd have to spend time like upkeeping my people.
that gal also he ran everything while you were gone because
Yeah.
he was the smartest one. Like, yeah, you had Bulvi, but you and Bulvi were usually running around. Where
Yes.
Etgal was
It's literally the smartest Viking that I had rolled out. And I had rolled out every single
Yep.
NPC to a degree. And I was just like, all right, so he runs everything. And I figured there's no point in them just being completely subservient. Like, they're running the entire town while you're away. And then that's going to trickle down to them because they're dealing with everything. So they had to put a lot of pressure on you to make sure you're doing the right thing every time.
Yep.
And that when business is slow, that you're doing things to help, or when business is really good, like, hey, I'm making the money, not you. You're adventuring, you're not here, I'm
Right.
doing the work. Like,
Right.
so there had to be a little back and forth, but I never made it like crazy with him.
it was the other
No,
the
but
other
it
guy that
was.
you actually had to worry about.
Oh,
Who
I
ended up
know. Yeah.
triggering everything, but that's a
Yeah.
different story for a different time.
Yeah, but I just feel like I just appreciated there was more depth to it. There wasn't just like, oh yeah, like that's your follower. Like you said, you're like, yeah, this guy works for you and he handles shit while you're away, but he's also smart and he's capable. Pretty much if you weren't the hero, he'd probably be in your shoes doing this. He'd probably be your peer doing this, but you have magic and he does not, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it was just cool because like you not only like I feel like it also gave my character some purpose because my character was kind of chaotic and my character was prone to just like doing like what they really wanted to do. They weren't necessarily evil, but they weren't necessarily good either. They were prone to whims. But that kind of gave me some grounding to be like, oh well, yeah, I can't really mess around because I got my peoples I got to worry about. Like,
Yeah.
I got my city that I care about. I got to go help my people.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing. Like if you get all these animals or you get all these hirelings and you're running now you practically have a keep or a war camp, whatever it may be, a tavern, you know, there's going to be other it shouldn't just be oh, we're out adventuring. Oh, we're back in the tavern, still all good and fine and everything like that. Maybe you want to give your players rest, and that rest now is, hey, you guys are back at your home base, but you have to take care of this, this, and this. And it's just kind of our rest, get back things together, maybe a little RP outside of the main quest line until something pops up. I think too much is it a has it always been a thing like these are your companions, these are your companions, they're gonna follow you no matter what. And sometimes that just doesn't feel right to me, you know? It it's weird like that.
Absolutely. When you get back, like, sure, they might give you the night to rest and relax and sleep in your own bed or whatever. But then, like any business or any like any major endeavor, when there's a lot of people cooperating together to work on something, there's going to be a bunch of fires, not necessarily always literal, but there's always a bunch of
No,
stuff
there's
going
always
on.
there's always a live fire somewhere.
Yeah, so when you're not around, like let's say in the scenario, obviously you're the player, so you're the boss, right, of these NPCs. When you're not around, there needs to be a de facto head. There needs to be
Mhm.
somebody who handles everything, that literally can do things and not have to use a sending stone every 15 seconds to call you and be like,
Mm.
oh, well, Hans got a splinter. What do we do? Like, no, they just deal with it. And then when you
Yep.
come in, they're going to let their frustration out on you a little bit. Like, where it's like, hey, we had all this stuff happen. We had all these things go on. We were running out of this, running out of this. Like, these are the things that we need you to deal with. Now that you're here, we need these supplies. We need this. We need to make sure that you had done this in this one town, and it ended up cutting off our rice shipments from them because they
Yeah.
now don't trust us. So now we're low on food. Now you have to deal with that. Those can actually be fun role play things that you can do. When you've been chasing the same thing for so long, and the players go back home. That's a good distraction. That's a really good distraction where
Yeah.
they're dealing with something else. They're actually getting a little rest in game mentally and as the character to actually be like, all right, now that I've dealt with the home BS, I need to go just kill something.
I need to get back out on that
Yeah.
trail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
and-
gives them a good purpose.
Yeah, and to build on that, I mean, even when you're not at home, you can still do stuff. Then the campaign that me and Neil are playing in, one of the things with the NPCs that I've noticed a lot that the other players are doing, it doesn't really apply to me because I came into the game late, so I don't really have any hirelings or anything. But since they have this keep and they have all these hirelings, they're always sending out letters whenever they get a chance. They're always sending out messages to send notes to lords and bulk up their defenses and do all this stuff to help out at home, and just giving orders to the people that work for them at their keep. So it doesn't even have to be a thing where every time you go back to the tavern it's oh, this happened, that happened, this happened, that happened. It's anytime I go to an inn, is there paper here, is there a pen, can I write a letter and have it mailed to my keep to give instructions to my NPCs, and that kind of allows you to sort of stay in touch, which can in turn help you further develop your relationships with your NPCs, which can be very helpful down the line. And that's something that I've noticed them doing. That's something I noticed the other players doing in this campaign that I think is really cool.
To deliver it, either it be a bird or this, that, or the other thing. So you hire somebody to go deliver this, and if you're in a really rough town and you're hiring somebody to go deliver it, you're like, all right, so here's some coin you need to well, here's a package, there's coin in it, so they're delivering that, they're delivering instructions and things of that nature. And you can also say, hey, listen, here's another letter. This is, if you want, you can join our cause. We will feed you. We will give you armor. We will protect you, and we can also protect your family. And now you're building the size of what you're doing, and you're also, you got to make sure you account for that too in different ways. You always have to account for the NPCs that you're bringing on. In the books, they have some stuff where it's like, oh, X amount of gold a day for keep or warehouse, or for this or for that. But on top of that, like, you do need to think about numbers too, because like if you use some of those crews to go do attacks while you're away, or to break defenses of something, or to even help build an area, like some characters I've played in the past where their NPCs and them were their whole point was to build up infrastructure and society. Like, you need to consider these things. If those people die, they need to be replaced. If you're trying to make it bigger, you need to add numbers. How are you going to add numbers? Well, there's a guy who needs a job and he has a family, a wife, kids, etc., or what have you, and now you've just recruited 5 more people. She can help in different ways, he can help in different ways. The kids, they're going to grow up in the society. If the society treats them good, you've just added more long-term numbers. So, you can do it 100 different ways, but that's something you should think about, even if it's not necessarily going to affect your game.
still
It's-
something to think about, just because that's how
Yeah.
life works.
Yeah, so those are all really good points, and those are a lot of the times as Steve's talking about. My character has started a guild hall trying to it's called the Free Folk Federation, all about the alliterations.
Word.
It's for people who are impacted by this great war that's going on, who maybe now don't have it's between the North and the South, and now they don't have their homeland. Well, here's a neutral cause that's not really fighting the war. We're just trying to survive. And it's pulling people in. So anytime we're traveling, my character actually goes around. There was one time he just tells people, "Hey, we're if you don't like it here, if you're not being treated well here, we are creating a society elsewhere. This is where it is," just to get the word out, because then you're going to start attracting people. Yeah, it might be good and bad. You know what I mean? That's how it works, and it's up to the DM to figure that out. But now you're going through and you're getting your name out. You're getting this meaning out, and it's going to start pulling people in regardless. Like I would do. There was one point in time I just had a conversation with this guy. He was a bum begging on the streets. My character had a conversation with him, gave him like a gold piece or a platinum piece as he was leaving. But I sat there, he was performing songs. I was like, "Oh, teach me these songs, teach me this." And I think it's that cool RP that you can have when you're trying to run hirelings, trying to run your own NPC aspect, because you gotta pull. They don't just magically appear. You know what I mean? You kind of got to work for it.
And I feel like too that people, maybe DMs or whoever's running your game, they have a lot to juggle already.
Yeah.
As far as like NPCs and the world and the story and the rules and the books and the dice and who brought snacks and I mean, seriously.
It's wild.
So sometimes I feel like people are like, well, that's just another headache. It's just another headache that I got to worry about your horse or your hippogriff or whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because I feel like, you need to make it so it's the player's responsibility.
Yes.
Certainly. Like, if this is your pet, then it's your pet.
Yep.
Like, you're feeding it, you're taking care of it. You can't expect other people to worry about it. If you bring it into the dungeon and the traps go off and everybody gets it and your creature gets it, well, that's what happens.
They got it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And but on the other side of that, and this is something that I've tried to express several times in our different podcasts, just like I say, like, I don't like to flesh out my whole story so that I leave myself opportunities. Every time I introduce like a hireling or a pet or something like that, like, those are also extra opportunities, because like now there's like all this extra role play. Maybe when Neil started the Free Folk Federation with his character, they had a guild hall that they were given. It was gifted to them for something they had done. But now they have 2 guild halls and a keep, a fortified keep.
Well done.
So
you've done well.
Now they're on a different level. So now they're not just people are going to start noticing them, like the downtrodden and the people that are fleeing the frontier where the war is happening. You're going to start getting the attention of the nobles in the area, of both the warring sides in the area, because now there's a fortified position next to where we're fighting or next to one of our fortresses. That previously was an abandoned city, and now this group has taken it up, and they're also arming it. Like they have armed people there that believe in that cause. So that creates a whole other dynamic that I can explore as the DM if I choose to.
Yeah, I think it opens up. It's one of those things, like, yeah, it may seem like it's a lot of work, but again, a lot of this stuff, we had mentioned it in another one when we were talking about like players knowing their sheet. This is now part of the player's sheet. Like, you should have a whole thing about, hey, if I want to run this guild hall, yeah, you and the DM figure out the cost, this, but those NPCs, those things are technically going to be ran by you as the player. And I think it's a great idea. Like, yes, here when we're playing with NPCs and we have these things, we're going to use our resources because it betters us. But if you're a group and you're gifted this guild hall and you don't want to use it and you don't want to do anything, then that's what it is. If you're not interacting with it, as far as I'm considered by the DM, well, it's not interacting with you. You're not interacting with it. You get no, net's neutral. It's not a disadvantage. It's not an advantage. But if you're using it, you're constantly using it, there's going to be advantages to it, and there's also going to be disadvantages, like Cody was saying. Now you have a group of noblemen who might be worried because they don't know what your intent is, and you're not aligned with anybody. So what are you doing? Like, now they're going to be on edge. They're going to think this is just an up.
Yeah, like here's this ruined city that we've looked at for the last 10 years, and now there's a finished castle in there, and there's 100 men with swords and spears inside the keep. Like, that's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, that's an issue for any feudal lord, where there's a group of armed guys in a fortified building that they're not friends with, or they're not sure of. Like, that's a big uncertainty. You know, we were saying, like, you don't have to kill yourself with the details, but when you choose to flesh these things out and you choose to explore these options and like letting those relationships develop with NPCs or with hirelings, or you get to the point where your players are running a country, like one of our dear friends, Jerry, passed away. He had this one campaign where he wanted to make an empire. He wanted to like unite all of these random nations and like countries. And he was this barbarian, this orc barbarian, who was trying to unite everybody under one banner. And he did it. He pulled it off. But it was something that he decided he wanted to do very early on. And as the dungeon masters, it was facilitated, And I feel like that's such a big part of it, because talk to your players, figure out what they're about, what they're thinking of, what they're interested in. Because if you can give them some of the stuff they're interested in, like, they're gonna want to keep coming back to the table.
Well, and also they'll take care of those things. Like, don't force your party to become emperors
if they don't want to be emperors.
If they don't want to be emperors,
right? And that's that whole argument that we were talking about. Like, should you have just written a book, or like, you just wasted like how many hours of people's lives, or like when you could have just wrote the story because you're trying to have your friends act it out in real time. Like, that's not what this is about. And so if you get a character or a player at your table that says, hey, I want to look into, my character was always dirt poor, and now that they're starting to come into a little bit of money, wants to basically make sure that they never have to be poor again. So they're going to start buying businesses, and they're going to start, like, allow them to do this stuff. I mean, within reason. Like, if somebody's just like constantly abusing it, like, I'm going to go and talk to my NPCs again, and they're going to teach me everything I need to know.
Well, you can't. How are they going to do that? That's going to take time. You don't have 27 years to learn this, because the end of the world's happening in 6 months.
Well, the thing that is cool too is, like, we mentioned that that Strongholds and Follower book with Matt Colville. They do a great job, because you roll based on whatever level of keep. Like, each class gets like their own little like a she shed.
Well, it's
they get like their own little area, and it's focused on like a rogue would have like a tavern or whatever, and like a bard might have like a theater. Like, everybody has like something. Like, the barbarian has like a camp outside of the keep.
It's a war camp.
But what was cool is that not only are there these things that are based on the classes, but they have effects that go along with them. So like if Sean, our barbarian, if his war camp were to move, south and set up next to a river near a town or whatever, if he stays there for more than a certain amount of time, he starts depleting their resources because Sean's barbarians are just eating and drinking and chopping down trees and doing whatever they want.
Yep.
And it could be a negative thing. It's something that they took the care to make it so that you could interact with these things on a different level. But there's things in place not just for the players, but also for the people running the game.
Yeah,
because then I could sit there and say to Sean, you pissed off these people because your troll shit in their yard, or like that's a problem,
Yeah. So I think definitely just NPCs, really cool thing to have, and there's a lot of options. But if your players don't want those options, you're just gonna have a headache trying to enforce those options, because it's something that the players they're not gonna be actively looking at. They're not gonna try and follow. They're gonna worry about themselves. They're gonna be worried about what they want to do. So again, if you're like, oh, you have now these groups saw you take down the Lich King, and now they've joined you, and they forcefully have joined your group, and they will follow you wherever you go. I don't want to deal with these people. No. I don't want to take care of these guys.
No, and that's a great point. And that's the whole that's just the whole thing. Like if your people at your table are not into that, like then don't, like at a certain point, you as the person running the game have to gauge your group. Like I know who I have at my table, and I know, okay, if I introduce this type of a thing, like this person might be into it. Or if I have like a massive, like full unit battle, like on a battlefield, like this is the person I want to talk to. It's just like our buddy Sean in Star Wars, like space combat. That's Sean. That's what he wants to do
all day.
Space combat. Boom.
Yeah.
So you have to, you kind of have to like get that in your mind. And I have just to like preach a little bit on like DM experience. I have spent so many hours like making a cool NPC that I was like, I would probably play this as a character if it wasn't an NPC. I've been like, it's so cool. And then I introduce it in the game and like no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
And then randomly they'll be like, oh, well, what's the deal with this place? And I'll just be like, oh yeah, well, that's run by Slippery Jenkins, and he's got a like it's a bar, and the bartender's got a pet otter that's Slippery Jenkins. And then everybody's like, that's the coolest shit ever. That's all we care about is Slippery Jenkins.
Yeah.
So you just have to you can't have that expectation. So it's that same give and take. Like if your players want to invest in a town, they want to build a business, that's what they want to do. That's their role playing thing that they want to do. They want to explore. You should try to facilitate that and let that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to build on something that you mentioned, you shouldn't have that expectation. You also shouldn't force that sort of relationship into the game by making that character a DMPC and just having them be, look at this super cool character I made. He's way cooler than any of your characters.
Deal with this one. Play with him.
Because then again, you're just writing the book.
Exactly.
And also, as Cody said, like, this character's so cool that like, if I wasn't the DM, I could be playing them. It's like, then wait for your time to not be the DM and then use them as a player character in a different campaign.
Well, that's even happened in the game that I have. I did a one-shot where I made a lizard folk druid, and I was like absolutely in love with that character. I thought it was like the best build ever. I was so happy with it. Yeah, I was so happy with it. And in 5th edition, it was really cool. And I basically just changed the name and the gender and put that character in my campaign as an NPC because it was cool, you know? And and I wanted to have that, you know. And
Yeah.
I've done a decent enough job with my NPCs now that we're in the later stages of play, like we're 10th level players. Um, you know, the party isn't always together; they split off, and it's kind of fun that they go and they like recruit their like well-known NPCs.
Yep.
You know, like our friend Sean, who plays Corbin, he is off on his own, but he's about to be rolling deep with a squad of like 4 or 5 like 9th, 10th level NPCs that he's befriended over 10 levels of play.
Yeah, it's if you add NPCs in, it adds a really cool effect, because if sometimes you're in a really mixed up campaign where there's a lot of stuff going on, you can't be together, and instead of punishing the party for not being together, now you're like, all right, maybe they can, because they've befriended these NPCs, these powerful people. They know what they're doing. So yeah, I can have a session that goes this way. You know what I mean? And that character is not going to die.
Right.
4 NPCs, 4 hirelings, to have your own place. And it's worth it for anybody who's like, it's a daunting task, I don't know if I'm ready for it. Give it a shot. Dabble in it. Make sure your players are all right with it. Talk about it. You're sitting maybe at that session 0 and you're like, I usually don't do NPCs, but guys, I will take a stab at it if you want to. You just put it out there.
You got to pay attention to the people at your table, and if they're asking questions, it doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to, like break the game.
Yeah, they're just trying to play. They're just thinking that's the way their character would play, or
well, how many times have you
they
played?
would look at.
How many times have you played Skyrim or whatever, and you're like, oh, they gave me Lydia as a companion. Like, I don't want her.
Lydia so much.
Yeah, I gotta go get Faendal.
Yeah.
You need the best archer in the game. Like, come on.
That's right, man. Like, you gotta go get like,
Yeah. I guess, does anybody have any last thoughts?
I think we kind of talked ourselves dry on this one.
I don't know, man. I could probably go for more hours.
I know we could keep going on this, but I think we should just table it, for the next totality.
Absolutely.
I think that wraps it up for us with managing NPCs. How do you keep track of it? How you don't? We could talk about it for hours.
I think the thing that we're really trying to get at here is that your bone pony will be a good bone pony so long as you are good to that bone pony. If you ain't out there feeding it, respecting it, wiping it down when it come back from frolicking in the fields, that you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna have an aggressive little bone pony. He might be spitting at you, kicking up dust with his little bone hooves.
Yeah. It's not good when you have upset.
That's what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, keep your bone ponies happy, boys and girls.